Hey everybody, my name is Ben Voss. I am happy to serve this year as the Freshman Academy Advisory Board Chair for Hillsboro High School. So the advisory board includes professionals from a variety of business backgrounds who share their professional experience to help students prepare for success in the future. So first, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Minnesota, and let me just begin by saying I talked to my brother here last month, and he was going ice fishing. So my brother works for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service in Minnesota, and I talked to him a few weeks back. The high temperature was -2 degrees. So he and his buddy are like, okay, cool. They went out and used an auger to like drill a hole in the ice, and then they hung out on the lake and just went fishing on the ice. Now, things are quite a bit different here with the weather in Nashville, but we did have a little ice storm, right, a couple of weeks ago. And one thing I'll tell you is that in a place like Minnesota, where there's a lot of snow and ice, you can't afford to act like you do everything on your own. Folks in Minnesota have to learn to depend on each other because the alternative is that you're going to freeze to death. So, I mean, there's something about extreme weather conditions that force people to find a way to come together and survive. And that's a lot easier if everyone does their part. And we have to learn to communicate with each other as well. So we have to set up ways to be able to communicate effectively. And obviously, this year in Nashville Public Schools has reminded me of that. All of us need to do our part. And we all need to pull together. And we've also needed to find new ways to communicate. So obviously I'm using Zoom, but using Microsoft Teams, Schoology, video, has created a whole new way of doing education. It requires us to learn new ways to connect with each other, even while we're staying socially distant. Well, here's another thing. I mean, you can't expect in a snowstorm that everyone else is going to shovel your driveway. So we all have to do our part. We all have to pull together, but we also all have to do our part. And when the snow plows come through Minnesota after a foot of snow has fallen, you better move your car or it's going to get covered up. And if that happens, hey, it's your responsibility to figure out how to deal with that, working with other people and figuring that out. So, we've had to stay socially distant from each other throughout this school year, but it's also shown us how important it is for all of us to learn how to work together, especially to stop the spread of a deadly pandemic, right? So let me just tell you a little bit about what I do today. I train and coach people on how to start their own business. And I also coach families on how to protect themselves for the future and achieve their financial goals. So a big part of what I'm doing right now is helping families to prepare and plan for students to be able to go to college. Now, I'll never forget, about 3 months after I got to Nashville, this is way back in 19 years ago, 18, 19 years ago, I was talking to someone about a job. And his name was Ken Edwards. He's an executive coach, works for Provident Leadership is the name of his organization. And someone thought I should meet with him. So I sat down with Ken. I'm sitting in his office and I asked Ken, I said, so are you hiring? And he said, well, Ben, I'm not actually looking for employees, but I'd be happy to help you start your own business. And that conversation really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And it really changed my attitude. I mean, now the word for this, for someone who starts a business, is entrepreneur. It's a French word that we use in English, but basically it just means someone who gets something started. An entrepreneur is a starter. And another word for that is initiative. So I'm going to share with you real quick here a little video slide here. It's a part of a presentation that I do, but it's by Robert Kiyosaki. Wrote a book called the Cash Flow Quadrant. He also wrote another book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what he talks about is the way that people in different mentalities and mindsets produce income. So the first one up in the upper left-hand corner is an employee. You just get a job. You go to work and someone says, this is when you show up, and you exchange your time for money. Now, people who are business owners, they actually make money by putting other people to work and helping to use the resources and ideas and the time of people to help become more profitable. They don't just have a job, they own a whole system that allows them to earn income. And then in the lower left-hand corner of this quadrant, you see a self-employed person. A self-employed person, you've got someone who owns a job, which is to say they have their own job, but they still have that exchange time for money mentality. And in the lower right-hand corner of the quadrant is an investor. And an investor is someone that owns investments. They own things that are able to actually generate income without them having to work or exchange their time for money. So if you think about it, 95% of the population are in the left side of this quadrant. They have jobs, maybe they're self-employed, they're working for themselves, but they're basically exchanging time for money. But 95% of the wealth that's created in our country comes from the folks who are the business owners and investors. So I just want you to think about that for a minute. You know, when we're thinking about how we get paid and what we do, you have to think about yourself. Do you want to be a consumer or an investor? Do you want to be someone who exchanges their time for money, or do you want to exchange your ideas for money? So it's just something to think about. And obviously taking initiative means you also have to take on the risk of doing that work. So just want to share a little bit of that with you. Now, you don't have to be a business owner to be someone who takes initiative, who gets things started. We can take initiative in our daily lives. We can email and text each other if we have questions. You can raise your hand if you have a question in class. You know, if we don't know who to talk to, we can look up the phone number for the school and call the school office. And you know, the thing is, no one is asking you to do things that are impossible for you. But as my friend Cheryl Mays, who used to be on the National School Board, she likes to say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And in order to learn something, you first have to be willing to admit that you don't know the answer. And then you have to know how to ask questions so that you can begin to find a solution. You have to do your part. And then it's your responsibility to do everything you can. And you can't blame the guy who's, you know, driving the snowplow for the fact that there's a bunch of snow on top of your car. The person driving the snowplow, they're just doing their job. It's your job to figure out, okay, how do I dig out of that so that I can drive on those roads once the person who drives the snowplow has done their job. And that's really, you know, the thing that gets an entrepreneur up in the morning. They're thinking to themselves, how can I find a better way to solve this problem? How can I get things done more efficiently? Because there are three things you always have to manage: time, energy, and money. Those are resources that you need to be creative and productive. It's up to you to learn how to manage those. So let me share this video real quick that shows how entrepreneurs think about solving problems. It's from the Kauffman Foundation, which is an entrepreneurial foundation. So let me see if I can do this real quick. All right, here we go. This is just a quick, like 3-minute video. Just take some time and take some notes, but also I love the illustrations in this video. I think this is a lot of fun. So here we go. All right, let's see if I can do this. I just realized I need to share my sound and not just my screen. So give me a minute. I'm going to actually review this back. See, live and learn, right? As I'm sharing this, I'm going to share the video clip and share my sound. Learning stuff new every day. Here we go. I am starting again. Here we go.
I'm Paul Kudrowski. I'm a senior fellow at the Kauffman Foundation. One of my sort of main driving ideas for most entrepreneurs is that the best ones are the people who scratch their own itch. Craig with Craigslist was trying to create something to allow him to buy and sell things. Right? Mark Zuckerberg was trying to answer a question about whether or not, I think it was originally some women he knew were actually attached. I mean, so they were trying to answer questions, right? They're trying to scratch their own itch. It wasn't a banker saying, here's a nascent market opportunity that I can fill. No, it was none of these things. It was people who were irritated at the world because the world wouldn't provide them something that they needed. They said, oh, the hell with it. I'm going to have to go out and do it because no one else will. And that's a remarkable and powerful thing, because being an entrepreneur is a frustrating and time-consuming activity that can be so difficult and yet so rewarding. But to get to the rewarding part, you got to tough it out through all this other stuff. And to tough it out, it better be your vision. Because if you're doing something because someone told you it was a good idea or you read about it in a franchise magazine, on those dark nights when you're wondering how you're going to meet payroll, you say, you know what, I don't know why I'm doing this. One of the things you see that's really unusual about most people who will go out is this degree of itchiness and impatience, that they just can't wait for someone else to do it. And not only that they can't wait, but they're not even that sure that if someone else does it, they'll do it the way that they wanted it done. right? So it's this kind of monomaniacal need to satisfy themselves, crossed with impatience, crossed with, this thing has to happen. And lots of us have things about the world, this bothers me. I'm never going to do anything about it, but it bothers me, right? You got to also have that crossed with this impatience. It has to happen sooner than later. And it also has to be the way that I want it to happen. And you put all those three pieces together and you've got yourself, Craig of Craigslist, you've got yourself a Zuckerberg, you've got yourself a Steve Jobs, because these are the people who have the confluence of those three things. It's not enough to have just any one, because you might stand around and just complain. Right? Or if you're impatient, you might just stand around and say, I'll just keep reading until I find out when the thing gets shipped. Maybe someone will ship it. Or if you just have the monomania, where it has to be my own way, you just sort of barking orders at the world, right? Saying, do it my way, do it, no one's paying any attention to you. So you got to have all those pieces. And so what all of those people had in common was enough of a background as a consumer of media and a producer of media that they could say, here's what I want. I want this. And they didn't have to articulate it out to what it would look like today. It's just in the next 2 years, if this did this, I'm happy. And then at the end of 2 years, they say, well, now it needs to do this and this and this, and now it needs to do this and this. And that's all fine. That's all iteration. But at least they had an idea that it has to do this. And if it does these things, that'll be fantastic. And that's the essence of being, a really successful entrepreneur. They were maddened and frustrated at the world, and they scratched their own itch, and it turned out to be an itch that a lot of us had.
All right, so that just gives you a little idea about how people who are entrepreneurial get started. Now, people who know how to get things started are amazing, but they also have to be willing to go through the messy part in the middle. And so that's another whole thing to consider. You may have heard the story of the famous inventor Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, or the record player. He also invented the electric light bulb. He actually held 1,093 patents for new inventions. Just think about that. Over 1,000 new inventions that he got a patent for. And even though he died over 90 years ago, he was thinking about the power of solar and wind energy 90 years ago, 100 years ago, thinking about solar and wind energy as ways to fuel our economy and give machines the power they need to operate. Now, someone found out that Thomas Edison had tried over 10,000 different ways to make the incandescent light bulb. And when someone asked him about it and said, it seems like you tried and failed so many times. How did you deal with that? And Edison said, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And that's the thing about taking initiative. You have to realize, making mistakes are just learning experiences. Now, there are some mistakes you can never take back, mistakes that hurt yourself and others. But on the other hand, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. So if you're willing to take that shot, take that risk, take that opportunity, I think it's so important to be willing to take initiative to get things started and say, what, let's do what we can do. I can't do it all. I can't do it all right. I don't have it all perfect, but I can ask the right questions and invite other people to get involved in the process. So as I close this out, I just want to share one more video that I just love. This is called The Gap, and it's a fellow named Ira Glass, who's a well-known podcaster. I feel a little like a podcaster this morning, or a video caster. I'm not very good at it, but I'm doing my best. And I feel like your teachers are probably all in that same boat. Like, I did not really study to be a video producer. But this is by Ira Glass, who's a really well-known radio show host and podcaster. He's started a podcast called This American Life, that I think is just wonderfully done and just really high quality stuff. And I think this will illustrate why I think it's so valuable to think about just getting started. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. Just get started. Be willing to be a beginner. And that's the whole thing about being a freshman. When you're a freshman, you're not expected to have it all figured out. You're expected to be new. You're expected to be a beginner. So don't be afraid to try, because that's how we get better. All right. So like I said, I'm an amateur when it comes to video casting. Ira Glass is one of the best in the business. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, thank goodness. It just such an encouragement to me. So here you go. It's about 2 minutes long.
Beide Positionen, vielleicht richtig vorgefährdet bin ich nicht, wenn ich ehrlich bin, aber ein ganz tolles Gespräch.
nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
Das eines Vorarbeiters vorstellen. Er kann ich spielen in beide Positionen und vielleicht in einem Stil. So, he will know. So richtig torgefährlich bin ich nicht, wenn ich ehrlich bin. Also da muss ich noch dran arbeiten.
All right, folks. So my encouragement to you is don't be afraid to be a beginner. Don't be afraid to start something new. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I will say, I'm going to challenge you all to contact me. You can actually reach out to me directly. My email address is benvos, benvos .tn@gmail.com. And I would love to hear what you thought about this video. Give me your feedback. What did you notice? What did I do wrong? What could I do better? Let me know. You can also reach out through your teacher. That may be a better and safer way to do things initially, just to kind of reach out through your teacher. Let them know you're interested, and you can send a message to me. Send a message through Ms. Wren, Melissa Wren, who's the academy coach at Hillsboro High School and is like an awesome teacher. If you don't know her, you need to know her. She's phenomenal. But do what you can. Get in touch. Let me know what you thought. I would love your feedback. And I would love to know what we as grown-ups can do better so that we can help you to be better beginners. So it was great talking with you. I hope you have a great day, great week, great month of March. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.